Hi, welcome to Therapy Review, Season 2. As always, I'll be your host as we take a look at ourselves through the lens of review. It's no secret between my friends and I that this show has always been heavily inspired by the Anthropocene Review, a show and book in which the host, John Green, reviews the facets of the human-centered planet on a 5-star scale. By the way, sorry to kinda nab your whole shtick, John, but to be fair, you probably should have done this one already. Regardless, that comparison has never been more accurate than it is today, because today's review is not about a movie, or a book, or a show, or a song, but instead about the practice of taking photos. I've loved pictures as long as I can remember. Sometimes, when I was a kid, my mom would break out a massive collection of photo albums. Books filled to the brim with old family photos. Photos of people that I didn't know and places I didn't remember. They were memories that didn't belong to me. I didn't mind, of course, because they belonged to somebody. Somebody who cared enough about that moment to memorialize it in ink. Somebody who longed to share that moment with others. Some photos were old, some new, and some even older. All I knew at the time was that they meant the world to my mom. So much so that she would occasionally remind me that if there was ever a fire, not to worry about people or pets or toys or games, just save the photo albums. She was joking, I think. At least, mostly joking. Probably joking? Her favorite photo was one that seemed ordinary to me. A photo of my dad and I sitting by a lake. She'd always flip to it, point, and say, "Do you remember this?" I'd always smile and nod, even though I didn't. She loved the photo all the same. And so I loved it. It felt weird, but important. It was my favorite memory that didn't belong to me. I would love to show that photo to you, but unfortunately the original print of that photo is lost, which is ironic to me considering she would rather die than lose any of her photos. Speaking of, the fact that she would rather die than lose any of her photo albums is ironic to me now, seeing as the first photo ever taken was almost lost to time entirely. The photo, titled Window at La Grasse, shows the view from a window overlooking a field. It was taken by a man named Joseph, who has a very French-sounding last name. A last name that I'm not even going to try and pronounce for fear of sounding silly. He took the photo in France, sometime between 1826 and 1827. The photo was created by heating a pewter plate treated with bitumen of Judea, a type of asphalt that hardens in light. He then placed that plate inside a small wooden box called a camera obscura. The box was then positioned out a second-story window for over 8 hours. He then removed the plate, washed it with lavender water, which removed the unhardened asphalt, thus creating the world's first photograph. The term heliography was coined by Joseph to describe this process, but he preferred the name light writing. I too prefer the name light writing. Unfortunately, almost immediately after taking the first photo, Joseph misplaced it, thus losing it entirely. I'd like to say there was some Indiana Jones type adventure connected to its rediscovery, but real life is often anticlimactic, and this is one of those times. The plate and subsequent photo was found in a storage crate in 1952, over 100 years after Joseph's death. I sometimes look up this photo. I often wonder what he found so interesting about this particular window as to spend 8 hours preserving its view. Maybe this is where Joseph would come to think. Maybe he fell in love there. Maybe this window overlooked the home of a bird he particularly liked. Or maybe, just maybe, he wanted to remember. Regardless of the reason, this photo stands as a reminder that as long as there have been cameras, people have used them to take photos of absolutely nothing. It's sort of comforting, in a way, to know that people have always been the same. The photo is older than the light bulb, the telephone, and human flight. By 1839, the camera became commercial. People went from having their portraits painted to having their photos taken. This was, at the time, a hoity-toity event, meant for the rich and royal, a serious and proud moment like having your portrait painted, and thus you were to remain stern and serious throughout the entire thing. That is, until 1901, when a young German man called Bertolt Laufer was sent to study the yet undocumented by the West culture of China. Bertolt brought with him a camera, and while on the expedition he took around 143 photographs. Photos of people and places, and my favorite, of a smiling man eating rice. This was most likely not the first time that someone had smiled while getting their photo taken, but it's the one that mattered. Again, way back in ancient China, having your photo taken was reserved for the rich and the studious, so most people had never even seen a camera before. The man in the photo had no idea that this was meant to be a formal event. He had no idea he was supposed to look stern and serious. He had no preconceptions about what he was supposed to be or how he was supposed to act, so he did what felt natural to him. A good, old-fashioned, honest smile. A close friend of mine is a photographer himself. One of the best I've ever seen, in fact. His photos feel grounded and real, while also fantastical and almost imagined. His photos also remind me of a memory that doesn't belong to me, but they're warm and they're whole, and I want them to be. Looking at his photos is sort of like standing barefoot in the grass. They're a practice in discovery. Anyways, he recently told me that he loves to take photos of people because it makes him feel close to them. It's something intimate to him that he can share with them and they can share with him. I feel like the smiling man is the embodiment of that feeling. It's a joy that was meant to be shared. It's a photo that was meant to be experienced. And even today, I look at it and smile. So thanks, smiling man. As time has gone on, cameras have gotten much smaller, and now what used to be a massive piece of equipment requiring 2 separate suitcases fits into our pockets so well that we forget we have them. A practice that used to take hours now takes a fraction of a second and is perfectly suited for randomly springing on your family at the dinner table. You're welcome, family. Much like my mother, I've always been a big fan of taking pictures. Sometimes of big things, sometimes of small things. Some things that don't matter, and some things that do. Sometimes I randomly spring photo shoots on my wife just because I never want to forget how she looked in that moment. I never want to forget how she looked in every moment, because every moment is another that I spend falling in love with her. Other times, I'll sneak candid photos of my family or friends. And most times, I just take photos to take a photo. There's something about it to me. To have a moment frozen in time, to have a piece of your life so perfectly preserved through your own eyes. It's a practice in fallacy, but also in hope. A hope to be able to return to loved ones you've lost, or to a place you've long forgotten. I know that I can't get those people back, and I know that I'll never go back to those places. I know that once a moment passes, I can't return to it. Memories are just that, memories. I'll never be able to experience those moments again, but maybe, just maybe, for just one little shining moment, I can feel it again.
you.